Hello students, hope you're fine. My name is Mtinga Kengera, a commerce teacher. So let's continue with our revision on commerce. So today we are going to have a revision on the topic known as foreign trade. Our revision will focus on the following subtopics. 1. The concepts of visible and invisible trade, and the concepts of balance of payment and balance of trade. Now, foreign trade is the buying and selling of goods and services to other countries or from other countries. So foreign trade is very, very important to our country and to other countries. So countries differ in terms of resources, in terms of technology, and in terms of productivity. And therefore, these countries need to exchange or needs to trade with each other. So there's no way a country can be self-independent. Countries depend to each other. So that's why countries should sell and countries should buy from other countries. So let's have an explanation on the following. So in foreign trade, countries do export or do sell goods and services. But also, countries do buy goods and services. But when we say a visible trade, here we consider only goods. And a visible trade, we consider only trading on goods. So countries can export or can import goods like cars or cotton or other goods. But when we say invisible, and invisible trade, we consider only services. Services like education, transportation, or health services. All these fall under this category, invisible trade. So in foreign trade, goods and services are traded. But when we say visible here, we mean goods. And when we say invisible, here we base on services. So we have various services which are traded in foreign trade. Our revision will focus more on invisible trade. And many people consider trade or international trade to be more on goods. But my dear students, this revision focuses on understanding how services are traded in foreign trade or international trade. So different services like now in education here, we have Tanzanians who are studying abroad. So they are buying that service, which is education, from those countries. But we have foreigners who are studying in our country. And therefore, they are buying this service from our country. When Tanzanians are studying abroad, they are buying from those countries. And therefore, they are importing such a service. But when those people from abroad come to study in our colleges or universities, we as a country, we are exporting such a service, or we are selling such a service. Now, tourism. Under this, when tourists are coming in our country, we are selling this service to them. But when Tanzanians are going abroad to tour in different countries, in that scenario, we are buying such a service. So that is importation. But when they come in our country, different tourists, we are selling to them this service and we are exporting such a service. Now come to another service, which is health. Health services. We have different doctors who are Tanzanians who are working in different countries. So in that scenario, we are selling this service as a country to those countries, and therefore we are exporting such a service. But in our hostels, we have different doctors who are working in our hostels from different countries, and we are buying such a service, and therefore we are importing such a service. Another service which is very, very important in foreign trade is sports and games. Under this one, we have different people who are involving in sports and games. For example, Mbwana Samata is a footballer playing in Aston Villa team. So Tanzania as a country will regard that as exportation, because they are playing football but is paid But we have some footballers who are playing here in our country. For example, those footballers who are playing in Simba and Yanga teams. Now these people are paid, and we regard these as importation of a service. But take an example in music. We have different musicians who sometimes go in different countries. For example, Diamond went in America, and we regard that as exportation. But sometimes musicians are coming in our country, and we regard these as importation. So, my dear students, we have a lot of services which have been traded in foreign or in international trade. So this concept is very, very important, and for sure is contributing much. Services contribute much in international trade or in foreign trade. So after this, let's have a look on balance of trade. Under this concept, balance of trade, this is a statement of countries' exports versus countries' imports. So it's a statement which shows countries So here you compare between countries' total exports and countries' total imports, but basing on goods. So when in balance of payment, balance of trade here is only goods. So you compare the goods you have exported to other countries and goods you have imported to your country. So the balance is what we call balance of trade. So balance of trade can either be favorable or unfavorable, or sometimes it can be balance of trade. So when you have a scenario like this, when exports is greater than imports, this is favorable balance of trade. So this situation is good to a country. A country should encourage. When you have a balance of this nature, then your country is performing well economically. But when you have a scenario like this, when your country's imports is greater than your country's exports, now this is unfavorable balance of trade. So this situation is not good economically. So the country is not performing well in international trade. It means the country is buying more from other countries, in terms of goods, and the country is selling less to other countries in terms of goods. So when we say balance of trade, as I've said before, here we consider only goods. But sometimes a situation can be are exports equal to imports. Now this is a situation where you have a balance of trade. So you have the amount of goods exported is equal to the amount of goods imported. Another concept on this part is balance of payment. Balance of payment is the statement of countries' exports versus countries' imports. But here we consider payments and receipts. Under balance of payment here, you consider both goods and services. So this is the balance which shows both goods and services. The receipts you have received from selling to other countries and the payment you have paid to other countries. So the amount of money received in the country are the result of exporting or selling to other countries compared to the amount you have paid to other countries are the result of importing or buying from other countries. So a balance of payment can either be favorable or unfavorable, but sometimes it can be balance of payment. So when you have a scenario like this, so when payments are greater than receipts, it means you have paid more to other countries than you have received in your country. So here it means you have paid as the result of importation. Now payments, these come from importation, while receipts comes from exportation. So by payment it means you bought from other countries, but receipt means you sold to other countries. So when payments are greater than receipts, the implication here is you have paid more to other countries in your goods and services. So the amount of money paid in goods and services to other countries are greater than the amount of money you received in goods and services from other countries. So you received less than what you paid to other countries. So this situation is unfavorable. So this BOP stands for balance of payment. So you have unfavorable balance of payment. Now this situation should be discouraged because it's not good to the country. But most of African countries or developing countries do face this situation because they're importing more or they're importing much than what they are selling to other countries. So in this situation, countries should find ways to remove the situation or to remove this problem. Now this is a problem for a country. This is not good economically. So countries should find ways to solve this problem of balance of payment because you are paying more than what you receive in your country in terms of foreign currency. So when you have a situation like this, receipts greater than our payments. Now these receipts comes from our exportation. Exportation on both goods and services. And these payments come from our importation on both goods and services. So it means you have received more foreign currency than what you have paid to other countries. So this is good economically. When a country is performing in this way, this country is performing well economically. So this is the situation countries should encourage. So when you have such a balance of payment, so the country is performing well. And this one is favorable balance of payments. Favorable balance of payments. So another name for favorable balance of payment is surplus balance of payment. It is called surplus. But another name for unfavorable balance of payment is deficit balance of payment. But it may happen that a country's total payments is equal to country's total receipts. So this is balance of payments. So it may happen sometimes that countries' payments or countries' payments on importation is equal to countries' receipts from exportation. So this concept is very, very important to understand, because countries do buy and sell goods and services. And therefore, a country should know at the end of the year, is the country benefiting from international trade? So this balance of payments will help a country to know if the country is performing well in international trade or the country is performing poor international trade. So this can be used as a measure to know how the country is performing in international trade. Another term to revise in this lesson is terms of trade. In terms of trade, we compare prices of exports with prices of imports. So we make a comparison between the prices of exports of what you have exported or you have sold to other countries to the prices of imports. So in short, it's a comparison between prices of exports versus prices of imports. So a formula for this is price index of exports, you divide by price index of imports. You multiply by 100. Terms of trade can be either favorable or unfavorable. So when prices of exports are greater than prices of imports, now this is favorable terms of trade. It means you are selling your goods to other countries at high price than what you're paying from other countries. So the prices you get or you receive or you're selling to other countries are greater than prices you're paying on those goods you are importing. But when you have a scenario like this, prices of imports greater than prices of exports. Now this is unfavorable terms of trade. So this situation is unfavorable. This is unfavorable, unfavorable, unfavorable terms of trade. But this one is favorable terms of trade. So this scenario is not good to the country's economy. So when a country is experiencing such a situation, this is not good economical. But in most cases, less developing countries are facing this situation. Terms of trade are unfavorable or deteriorating terms of trade. And the reason for this situation or scenario is most of developing countries or African countries are exporting raw materials. Raw materials has low value, and therefore they are getting or they are paying low price in international markets. But also the manufactured goods which are exported to other countries are of low value, and therefore they get low price in the world market. These countries are importing manufactured goods which are of high value. For example, when you import a car is very, very expensive. Or when you import a phone or a computer. So all these contribute to our terms of trade to be unfavorable or deteriorating. The goods we are importing the goods we are exporting are of low value, and the goods we are importing are of high value. And therefore you can see prices of our exports are less or are low, while prices of imports are very, very high. And therefore, welcome back, my dear students, for this session of passing through different questions on this topic. Now, question number 1 is, current account in the balance of payments comprises both visible and invisible trade. With example, explain how invisible trade affects balance of payments. So the question here, my dear students, is asking about to explain how invisible trade affect balance of payments. But before going to dive to the question, let me remind you something here. That in balance of payments, we have two main accounts. Now, in balance of payments, We have these main accounts, one being current account and the second one being capital account. Now, under current account is where we record goods and services, or visible being goods and invisible being services. While in capital account here, we record all investments. So this one is concerned with investments. So for example, when a person buys shares in a certain company abroad, this is recorded under capital account. Or when people from abroad buy shares in our companies or companies found in our country, this also will be recorded in this account. But when foreigners come and invest or start an industry in our country, this also will be recorded in this account. So these two main accounts are those main which are found in the balance of payments, being current account and capital account. So come to our question. So current account in the balance of payment comprise, as I've said, visible and invisible trade. Yes. With example, explain how invisible trade affect balance of payment. So as I have explained before that invisible trade, this is concerned with services. So the question requires you to explain how invisible or services affect balance of payment. Under this one, you need to explain on those services and how they affect balance of payment. For example, how education affects balance of payment. So I have said before, when Tanzanians are studying abroad, it means they are importing that service. So they are buying from those countries. And this is recorded as payments. But when those people from other countries come and study in our colleges or universities, they are paying. So this is regarded as exportation. So this is receipts. So from this scenario here, you can see when we go abroad, we are paying. So the balance of payment is affected in that way, that we make payment in those countries. But when they come in our country for studies, it means we receive. So this is receipts. Now come to tourism. So when different tourists come in our country, we are selling this service. And therefore, we are receiving money from those tourists. So in the balance of payment, this is recorded as receipts. But when Tanzanians are going abroad, it means when they are there, they are paying for this service. And therefore, this is recorded as payment or imports. So come to another service. So when footballers like Mbwana Samata, who is playing in Aston Villa in England, to us this is exportation as a country. So he is paid, and therefore this is recorded as receipts. But when we are paying those footballers who are playing for our teams like Simba and Yanga, this is recorded as imports and therefore payments. So under that scenario, you can see how those invisible trade, which are services, affect balance of payments. So either by payments or by receipts. So when you receive, it means you make your balance of payment to be favorable. But when you're paying, it means you are affecting your balance payment in a negative way. But when you receive, you affect that balance of payment in a positive way. So hope you are clear with this question. So my dear students, a question may be asked in that way. So what you need to understand here, you just understand that we have visible and invisible goods. So when the question is specifically for invisible, it means here you have to talk on services and not goods. And for sure, my dear students, services nowadays are taking a big part in the balance of payment because nations are trading services. Different services are traded. So with this question here, you just know the services and you have to explain on how they affect balance of payment. Now let's come to another question. Now question number 2 is, suppose a certain country's total payments of all imports for both visible and invisible trade worth T shillings 200 billion. So exports, imports, so total imports for both visible and invisible is 200 billion Tanzanian shillings. Now the question continues, and the total exports for both visible and invisible worth 180 billion. So the question is asking, interpret the given information. So with this scenario here, having imports 200 billion and exports 180 billion. Now what is interpretation with this information? So you have imports for both visible and invisible, and also you have exports for both visible and invisible. Now what's the interpretation here? As you can see here, imports is greater than exports. So you have this scenario here, imports is greater than exports. So what does this mean? So the message you can get from this information is imports is greater than exports. So what does this mean? Here is, this is unfavorable balance of payments. So it's unfavorable balance of payment because it includes both goods and services. So when you see from the question that is total payment of all imports for both visible, as you see from the question, is total payment of all imports for both visible and invisible. So on this question, it includes both goods and services. So that's why we are saying this is unfavorable balance of payment and not unfavorable balance of trade, because these include both goods and services. And you can see imports is greater than exports, so is unfavorable balance of payment. A question may also need you to explain, or a question can be asked in this way. Now, what are the measures? What are the measures to improve or to solve this situation? Now, what are the ways to remove balance of payment deficit? Our question here, we have balance of payment deficit. Now, a question may need you to explain what are the ways which can be used to remove or to solve the problem, because this is a problem. Yes. So number one is a country which is faced by deficit balance of payment. This country needs to increase the volume of export through conducting exhibition in foreign countries. So a country can do this. You have to increase volume of exports by doing different ways, like conducting exhibition in foreign countries. Number two is to impose several import restrictions such as tariffs, quotas, etc. So a country may decide to impose some different restrictions like tariffs. You tax more those imports so that you discourage importation. Another way is to increase production for exports. So under this situation, countries should make sure or should use modern technology to increase production for exports. Not only that, but also they should produce goods of high quality so that those goods can get markets from other countries. Another way is you can undergo devaluation policy. This is a scenario a country can do sometimes when the situation is worse. A country can decide to devalue its currency so that its currency becomes cheaper, and therefore many countries will be attracted to come and buy goods in the country because goods will become cheap compared to other countries' goods. Another one is acquiring financial assistance from donor countries. So under this one, a country may find out on how to get assistance from other countries. And when those financial assistance come in our country or in a country which is facing balance of payment deficit, that amount will be recorded as receipts. So this will help to solve the problem. So my dear students, these are some of the ways which can be used to solve or balance of payment deficit. Or these are the ways in which a country can do in order to overcome the problem of balance of payment deficit. So let's have another question. Now the question is, why most of developing countries are experiencing deteriorating terms of trade? Why most of developing countries are experiencing deteriorating terms of trade? Now, deteriorating terms of trade, in other words, you can say, this is unfavorable terms of trade. Now, what are the reasons for this situation? Why most of developing countries are experiencing this situation, including our country? Now, the following are the reasons. The following are the reasons for deteriorating terms of trade. Number one is low prices of exports. Most of developing countries are exporting raw materials which are of low value, and therefore raw materials get low prices. Another one is high prices of imports. Less developing countries, they import manufactured goods which are of high value and therefore high prices. And this affects the terms of trade in a negative way. Number three is high interest from loans from developed countries. So when developing countries get loans from those developed countries, the interest which are paid as a price for that loan is very high. So this also has been a reason for deteriorating terms of trade. Another one is discovery of substitutes of raw materials such as synthetic material which has replaced cotton. Now we used to export raw materials, but developed countries has discovered other materials which are used as substitute to those materials we used to export, and therefore demand for those materials has decreased, and therefore prices for those materials also has fallen. And the last one is imposition of strict free trade policies by developed countries. Now developed countries has imposed strict trade policy to developing countries, and therefore demand for our goods has decreased, and therefore prices also for those goods which we export has decreased. As a result, terms of trade have been affected negatively. Yeah, let's have a look on this question. So the question is, explain the components in the balance of payment. As I told you before that balance of payment comprises two main accounts, which are capital account and current account. Now, under each account, there are components. In capital account here, we have various investments. So, in this question, you need to explain the components in the balance of payment, the elements, what are included in the balance of payment. So, we have these two accounts, and under each account, you have different elements which are there. So here you have different investments. So under this one you can explain different investments like shares and industries which are invested in a country or in other countries. So you should show that. But in current account here we have goods and services. So you should explain. So you explain on some goods, goods which are in balance of payment. So you can choose some goods and explain on them. But also you have services. Then you can explain on some services like education, tourism, transportation, So this is how you answer such a question. We should show the components. So here you start by explaining that balance of payment is or comprises two main accounts, and under each account there are some components. Now what are those components? So you explain those components. And then under current accounts, where you have goods and services, you have things to explain over there. So in services or invisible trade, show these various services: education, tourism, transportation, and other services. So this question you have to explain different components or elements which are in balance of payment. So that's how you attempt such a question. But first of all, you have to show those main accounts which are in balance of payment. And from there, in each account, you should show the components you have found, and then the question will be answered in a good way. Hope you have enjoyed the lesson. Let's meet for the next lesson, where we'll be having a very interesting topic on import trade, and we'll focus on the sources of information in import trade.